Ever take a look at a stock and wonder, how could a company like that be down? Well, today we're doing a deep dive on one of those head scratchers. We're talking Intel.
Yeah.
So microchips, market shifts. Can this tech giant get back its former glory?
It's a fascinating case. It really is. Intel's tech is practically everywhere, right? But their stock performance, that's a whole different story.
That's putting it lightly.
Yeah.
54% drop over 5 years. And hold on, a whopping 60% overall.
Wow.
Yeah. Simply Wall Street, they got the numbers. Ouch. That's got to sting, right?
Yeah.
Even if you're just like watching from the sideline.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, those numbers, they show a big shift, right? Like investor confidence is shaken.
Yeah.
What's really interesting to me is this drop, it's happening when Intel's gone from, losses to actually making a profit.
Okay, now that's where the head scratching really starts.
Right.
They're making money, so why is the stock still going down?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? The article, it points to a 7.1% drop in revenue year on year. And that's a key factor. Now, don't get me wrong, a revenue decline, it doesn't always mean disaster. Gotta look at the context, right?
Right.
But it's definitely like a red flag that investors are watching closely.
So it's not as simple as profit equals stock price goes up. There's more to it.
Exactly, precisely. The article really stresses this idea. Look at earnings and revenue trends over time. Don't just focus on those daily, stock market ups and downs, to get a real sense of how a company's doing.
Kind of like when you go to the doctor, right?
Yeah.
It's not just one visit. It's like they want to see your vitals over time.
Exactly. And so the article, it has this graph, right? And it shows Intel's earnings and revenue, and it tells a story.
Right.
It does. So they managed to get back to profitability, which is great. But the upward trend, it's not a straight line up. It's more like a bumpy with some dips and turns along the way.
Okay, so clearly some challenges there. What's the overall message? What are those lines telling us?
I think they really show how complex the whole thing is. Intel's not down for the count, not at all, but they're not, in the clear either.
Right.
They need to prove to investors, hey, this profitability, it's here to stay.
Yeah.
And that they've got a solid plan for growth in the future.
So it's like they're on, probation. They got to prove themselves again.
Yeah, you could say that. And this brings us to, this idea of total shareholder return, TSR, the article calls it.
Okay.
It's a way to look at how well an investment's doing beyond just the stock price.
TSR, that sounds a little, got to have a finance degree to understand.
Yeah, no. It's actually pretty straightforward.
Okay, good.
Imagine you buy some stock, right?
Right.
And the price, hopefully it goes up.
Right.
But then you also get dividends, those payments some companies give to shareholders. So TSR, it looks at both of those things, gives you a bigger picture of your return.
So it's not just about the sticker price. It's like, what's the whole package deal?
Exactly. Dividends, they're easy to overlook, but that's actual cash in your pocket, right?
Yeah.
And in Intel's case, even though their TSR shows a loss over the past 5 years, those dividend payments, they've actually helped soften the blow a bit, especially for investors who've been in it for the long haul. They act as a bit of a buffer, like a cushion against those stock price drops.
Okay, so that makes sense.
Right.
But it sounds like even with dividends, investors are still feeling a bit uncertain, right?
Yeah.
Is it just Intel? Or has the whole market been, a bit shaky lately?
That's a really important point. The article mentions that while Intel's been going through it, the overall market, it's actually had a pretty good year.
Oh, really?
A 40% gain in the past year. So yeah, Intel's performance, it looks even worse when you compare it to how well a lot of other companies have been doing.
Oof. It's like bringing a spoon to a knife fight.
Yeah, something like that.
No wonder investors are a bit on edge.
Definitely. It's put a lot of pressure on Intel to really step up their game. And this kind of connects to a concept the article talks about, contrarian investing.
Contrarian investing. Is that like when everyone zigs, you zag?
You got it. It's about, seeing potential where others just see risk. Some investors, they actually look for companies like Intel, companies that might be undervalued, right? Hoping for that turnaround, that big payoff.
Okay, so high risk, high reward kind of thing.
Exactly.
But how do you tell the difference between a company that's truly got potential and one that's, just going down?
That is the question. And that's where fundamental analysis comes in. It's about going deeper than just the stock price, right?
Okay.
It's looking at their financials, what their competition's like, the management team, their overall strategy.
Like a detective, but instead of fingerprints, it's balance sheets.
Exactly. And for Intel, there are definitely both good and, challenging things to think about. The article does point out some things that potential investors might want to dig into a little further.
Okay, so mixed bag then. What are some things that might be giving investors pause when they think about Intel's future?
One thing the article really stresses is just how competitive the whole chip-making world is these days. It's not just Intel anymore.
Right. You got AMD right there with them. Plus all these new specialized chip makers focusing on specific things, like AI.
Absolutely. Intel needs to prove that they can not only keep up, but that they can stay ahead of the curve. And that leads us right to the heart of it, right? What does the future hold for Intel?
So the billion-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
Can they do it? Can they pull it off? What does Intel's future look like? And what needs to happen for them to get back on top?
Well, it's like they're at this crossroads. Challenges on one side, opportunities on the other. One big thing is they got to regain that manufacturing edge they used to have. I mean, for years, they were the best, right? When it came to making chips, nobody did it better. But lately, setbacks, tough competition, you name it.
Yeah, it's like if you're not moving forward, you're falling behind.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And in tech, man, that's like standing still is the same as going backwards.
Totally.
So Intel, they're putting a ton of money into new factories, trying to, one, make more chips, obviously,
right,
but also to have more control over their whole supply chain. That's important, right? Meeting demand, not having to rely on other companies so much.
It's just like taking back control, taking their destiny into their own hands.
You got it. But, and this is important, just making more chips, that's not enough.
Right. Got to keep up with the times, right?
Absolutely. Got to push the limits of the tech. They need to be making the fastest, the most efficient, the most powerful chips out there. That's how they're going to win back those tech giants, stay ahead of the game.
It's like they constantly have to one-up themselves.
Yeah.
Just to stay in the running. Otherwise, those yellow flags, they can turn into like full-on roadblocks pretty quick.
Exactly. Exactly. And speaking of, those challenges, I think it's worth digging into those a bit more,
Yeah, let's do it.
The article, it talks about just how fierce the competition is now in the chip industry. It's crowded out there.
For sure.
And some of these companies, like AMD, they are not messing around. They're taking market share. Their chips are getting better all the time.
Yeah, and you can't forget about these like niche chip makers.
Yeah.
Like focusing on specific things like AI, mobile devices.
Oh, absolutely. It's not a one-size-fits-all market anymore, not even close.
Yeah.
Intel's got to show they can be flexible,
yeah,
cater to these new areas, but at the same time hold on to their turf where they're already strong. It's a balancing act, for sure.
It's that classic innovator's dilemma, right? Protect what you've got, but at the same time, got to explore new territory. Seems like for Intel, the future's all about being able to do both.
Exactly. And that's where their decisions become even more crucial. Where do they put their resources? Manufacturing, new products.
Right.
It's high stakes, and everyone's watching how it plays out.
This whole deep dive, it's made me realize a company, it's more than just that stock price,
That's for sure.
It's all this stuff, innovation, competition, how the market's moving, the decisions they make.
Couldn't agree more. It's like a reminder, even these huge companies, these tech giants, right? Like Intel, with everything they've done, you're not immune to change. The market, it can shift on a dime.
It really makes you wonder, what's it going to take for them to turn it around, get back to where they were? Yeah. Is it like some crazy innovation, buying up other companies, or, some combination of all that?
Yeah. Those are the big questions, aren't they? And while we don't have a crystal ball,
right,
we can look at where things stand now, right?
Right.
Explore the possibilities. And that's what makes this whole thing so interesting, I think.
It's like we're watching them write the next chapter. And we're all kind of on the edge of our seats to see what happens.
Yeah, and that's what's so great about it, right? You just don't know. Potential, risk, it's all mixed up together. It's what makes following a company like Intel, compelling.
For sure. So we've talked about where they've been, the tough stuff they're dealing with now, what the road ahead might look like. But for our listeners, what's the takeaway? Especially if they're thinking, should I invest?
Right. And it's really important to remember, we're not giving financial advice here. This is about information, context, not telling anyone what to do with their money.
Right. We're more like armchair analysts, not financial advisors.
Exactly.
But that being said, what are some things our listeners can kind of, chew on? What really stood out to you as we dug into Intel?
To me, it comes down to execution. Can Intel really scale up their manufacturing like they're talking about? And at the same time, keep pushing the envelope on the tech side? Can they get back what they've lost? And can they, outmaneuver the competition in a market that just doesn't stand still?
Those are the million-dollar questions for sure. And it doesn't sound like there's an easy answer. It's not like a sure thing either way.
Nope. They're at a crossroads, big time. A lot riding on what they do next.
For sure. It really drives home this point. Even in tech, where things move so fast, the fundamentals, they still matter.
Oh, absolutely.
Financial health, having a vision, being able to adapt. Those things are crucial.
Couldn't agree more.
It's a good reminder for all of us, I think. Whether it's a company like Intel or even just, our own careers, our investments.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from all this?
For me, it's be curious. Don't just take things at face value. Don't just read the headlines. Dig a little deeper. Ask the questions. Really try to understand what's going on, especially with these companies, these technologies that affect our lives.
Well said. It's about looking beyond the surface, seeing the bigger picture, and always trying to learn, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, on that note, I think it's time for us to power down for today.
Until next time.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of Intel. It's been a fascinating conversation, and hey, we can't wait to see what the future holds for them. Until then, keep those minds curious, and we'll catch you on the next episode of The Deep Dive.